Denmark, and maybe we'll all go there next year if they accept the proposal, to do to really explore how can we use this forum well. It's already a very committed, socially committed festival. I think it's the only festival that systematically gives away much of its money to various causes. But again, it's this unique opportunity to take people who are interested in culture and do something. So we've proposed to them a few projects, including the Sucky Trucky and Wild Pets and other wonders from the Museum of Natural Futures that the Environmental Health Clinic has developed. So about 15 projects that we can set up in the festival with the idea of not making it a bucket of alterity where you keep everything inside, but in fact making it something where you take something home with you. So the first project that the Wild Pets that I mentioned is similar to the based on the ag bags and other platforms. The idea being that you would get a cocoon or a juvenile organism and 4 or 5 plants, host plants and nectar plants, and a phenological clock and other workshop booklets to equip and incite you and delight you into taking your wild pet home, planting the habitat, preparing for when it emerges, and repopulating the and addressing the pollinator crisis in the various proximal areas where we get a lot of. So that's one example of the kind of deliberate repopulation strategy that uses the gathering of people to create a, I don't know, did anyone look up how many people go to Roskilde? Can somebody quickly look that up? The Sucky Trucky similarly takes this project which is called the Urban Space Station, which was the lab that was designed for NYU. You can see here, this was designed for this building here, and one of the projects we'll talk about later is to try again to get it, to launch it and land it on the rooftop. It is a controlled environment greenhouse built of space foil, ETFE, which is more transparent than glass, and it takes this CO2 enriched air from the building below and resupplies oxygen enriched air back to the building. Right, so yeah.
There was 130,000 whatever.
130,000 people.
Yeah, 2013. Yeah.
Wow, camping outdoors in this temporary city. That's a city. That's bigger than NYU, right? That's a huge lot of people. So the Urban Space Station is actually coming down this week. It's been in Germany, where it sits on a building about 20 times its size. Right? So we take a controlled environment agriculture greenhouse will cycle air once every minute, right? They actually create CO2 enriched air by putting on a generator, by burning oil to get the CO2 enriched air, because you get the growth response. So in commercial greenhouses, they're running diesel generators just to produce CO2. Right? It's crazy. Whereas buildings produce it all the time, right? And at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, when people get sleepy, in an occupied building like this, the HVAC system is rated so you flush air every 20 minutes or so, right? So in a commercial greenhouse, you're flushing air, forcing it through once every minute, once every 20 minutes in a building. So you've got a 20-to-1 ratio. We have a number of other issues about this, but the green is packed around, it's not on tables, right? It's packed around the outside to maximize the leaf area index around the outside. You get more area that way, right? Around the surface than on the tables. And that means you create an event space inside, right? You gather inside and it's shady and luscious, and the temperature and moisture is very different from the controlled climate environments in a inhabited building. And it makes a delightful place to do what? Anybody here a yoga practitioner? If yoga were a social movement that concentrated on the movement of air, as it does, and if yoga studios actually did more than inhabit low-cost real estate. I think there was, about 5 years ago I read there was 800 yoga studios in downtown Manhattan. It's startling me.
Partner with Yoga to the People, which is like a donation-based yoga studio, but they have one right here on St. Mark's.
Yes, the main one is there, yeah.
Yeah.
I could, but they're not, they're not, because they're donation based, their project is very different to actually re-engineer infrastructure, right? But if we did take the huge ballooning industry of yoga and turned it into a positive social force that's not just about self-study and interiority and calm and the wonderful things that yoga, of course, delivers, but if it were a social movement, we harness it in this way to produce desirable and different sorts of things.
Wait, so the outside of the pod is where the plants are growing?
Yeah. This is actually, the plants haven't grown up.
Yeah,
very
okay,
much
that's
this
fine. Okay, that's fine.
So there's not much green. This was when it was first taken.
I have a really practical question again. You said that this type of construction infrastructure was about taking the CO2 of the building to generate O2 for the people in the building. But as soon as the sun will set down, the plants will need O2 to live, and they will produce CO2, right?
At night, they respire.
At night.
When
So is that might be a problem for, as they need O2?
we're locked in a social contract, a biological contract with plants, right?
Yeah.
That's actually why we live, because we have a contract of gas exchange, right? So the non-monetary exchange is, and can it be balanced? Yes, it can. So that's exactly what this is about. It's about producing enough leaf area index so that you will, in fact, absorb the CO2, make use of the waste products, the thermal waste, the grey water, and then turn that back into benefits. So this is an icon of mutualistic systems design, right? Where all parties benefit, taking waste and turning it into benefit, right? And the output is, of course, nutraceuticals and plants of high value that we can use, because we have an interdependent relationship with plants, right? In many different ways.
What's the water supply? Where is the water supply coming from?
It comes from the grey water, and you can see it's a cycling system, so it runs down.
The grey water from the building itself?
Yes.
Okay.
Waste, water, there's other systems that use the waste paper and other things, but essentially it's mutualistic systems design. So the idea of this, why did I want to put this up here on the when I came here? did I spend my entire startup budget trying to get NYU to let me launch an urban space station? Sorry?
There's a lot of reasons.
Well, yeah, it's not only, rethinking and tweaking and making this work, making sure the leaf area index is sufficient and figuring out, what it could be. But it's also a glowing icon, a symbol, a billboard of mutualistic systems design. It's also taking invisible infrastructure, HVAC systems, and industrial greenhouses that are out of sight, out of mind, and coupling them into the larger project to reintegrate vegetation back into the urban environment, to make living infrastructure, to remarry that relationship between the marine areas. Niels is so the what's happening to this greenhouse at the moment is we're taking a diesel truck, the sucky trucky, and we're blowing it up. That is, we're taking off the flatbed stuff at the back, and we are putting this on it and driving it. We're taking the exhaust pipe from the truck and putting it back in through the, actually creating the walls so they're 14-inch wide, so that the exhaust will be sucked back in and cycled, so that we will have a moving display of this very issue. How much leaf area index does it take to absorb the particulates, the SOxes, the NOxes, the contaminants that each truck produces, right? Display. And inside that is then an exhibition space where we have many other things. So this idea of, if you will, a visualization that works, a experiment that could be adapted onto any car. So-called clean diesel is huge in Europe. Huge. I mean, how many diesel cars are there in Europe?
I think there is now more than at the beginning and more than fuel.
Yeah. So, if we can work it out for a truck, we can park it in neighborhoods. Inside can be kits where you can adapt your diesel car and put a little, blow it up, and put a little ballooning encasement in order to demonstrate exactly this relationship. We face a challenge here to, who works for the sustainability office? It wasn't you.
She's not
She's
here.
not here, yeah. See if they can. Anyway, it's a very different discourse to what sustainability is, right? What's the difference between what the sustainability office is at this university and every other? What do they focus on? Stickers, yes. And accounting. They've got a really nice log of every light bulb and each building's energy use to tweak it. So incremental. So what's at stake in the way that sustainability has been institutionalized at universities is something very important. It's this belief in accounting, data. We don't need the creative imaginary. We don't need to reimagine and redesign our relationship to natural systems. We just need to count things better and give it little leads, and Energy Star ratings. And the reason why we're here and in a creative pedagogical environment is because clearly I would argue that that's not the case. I would say that the most extraordinary systems challenge, the space race of the 21st century, the most complex design challenge that we face, is to reimagine and redesign our relationship to natural systems through infrastructure, not through behavior modification. In the UK, they talk a lot about behavior change. And to an American or to an Australian ear, that kind of nanny state just sounds like social engineering, right? Do we want to individualize the environmental challenges as consumption choices and reusing your shopping bag and changing a light bulb and printing on both sides of the paper? Or do we want to say the infrastructure, invisible, huge, expensive as it is, undebated, is actually what aggregates all of our actions into collective action, and that's where we need to reimagine and transform our collective agency, right? It's in our infrastructure. And who controls infrastructure? Do we normally talk about infrastructure in art classes?
No.
But I would say this is the new frontier. This is the new territory. And in order to institutionalize that, having launched the urban space station, this is called the USS, the urban space station, as opposed to NASA's and other space agencies, the International Space Station, right? And they're concerned with extraterrestrial conditions. I would argue that we've got some pretty big, complex challenges right here, and that we can apply, in fact, the closed and coupled systems design that we've learned from space systems engineering to contemporary cultural challenges that are both technical, cultural, institutional.
Do you mind if I ask like how much it costs like to install and create one of the USS?
An urban space station?
Yeah.
Well,
I know you spent like $100,000.
I spent $100,000 just in getting the permit. This one cost about 80,000 euro. Not so much for a lab. For a lab, a lab is usually around $500,000. It's extraordinary amounts of money. This is actually designed to be built as a barn raising in the tradition of collective production. You want Okay. There's another example of infrastructure that I want to give before I hand off, and then I'll just send you the thing. This is the Roskilde Festival. I thought I'd explain it to you, and then we'd upload it to them, and then it would be good to get your sponsors involved. Anyway, the other example of an infrastructure project for which is along these lines of the urban space station. This can be built at any scale. It's relatively inexpensive materials, and kit greenhouses can be radically inexpensive. But in this case, it's designed to be both aerodynamic. It works as a kind of inverted foil, so aerofoil. So it kind of, instead of being picked up by the wind, it is held down by the wind. It bridges over, so it actually doesn't span load on the green roof. It actually looks like a bridge where on the compressive brick surfaces and it does this coupling, right? So the idea is that if you help to build something, what happens? You might not know much about HVAC systems or compressive strength of span loading, but if you're building it, what would happen?
If you're building this?
Yes. Or if you're involved in producing a project. We talked last week about why it's important to work with creative professionals.
Figure out better, cheaper ways to do it as you.
Exactly. Not only do you understand it better, understand how it works, understand why it's placed there, so labor is not abstracted labor. Labor is done by intelligent people who are figuring it out as they go, right? So even though none of you are construction experts, this is designed in order to be able to build it collectively, to collectively understand, and then once you understand it, you can actually, well, why didn't you do it this way? Or couldn't we do this way? Could we do it at this scale? Could we do it here? Once you have enough ownership, once you have enough understanding of a project, you begin to own it, and then adapt it and innovate, right? So that's what an open system demonstrates and is open to, as opposed to closed proprietary systems that you buy off a shelf, right? So the truck, similarly, all of these systems are designed to be produced collectively and built collectively and then taken back to at home where you can rebuild and reinterpret them. So the other kind of classic infrastructure project is the intersection. And you would understand that there's a lot of debate about the intersections at the moment. Well, we're going to quickly go through them. The idea of the intersection is a really critical one right now because, sorry?
I was just about to ask if this sort of idea could be adapted to like highways and overpasses where like a lot of...
So this is the visualization of the autonomous vehicle and part of the BS about autonomous vehicles. Does that look scary to you? Why do you think it looks scary?
Or just when the cars change direction, turn left or right, they're all so close to each other, things could go wrong.
Catastrophic failure mode is the if one car makes a mistake, it's open to that, right?
I don't think it's that scary because when you automate it, there's less error than human error. Unless the scanner fails at that moment.
We'll debate that, but there's something called the normal accident. And when you set up a system, when you design a system that has many, not one catastrophic failure mode, but many, then you're designing a brittle system. And so this is actually not even in engineering mainstream would you actually do this. You would have, even if it was algorithmically controlled. But now to your point, there's a bigger political issue at stake, right? Because the idea that a layer of silicon over our city can deliver efficiency and speed and air quality improvements and turn the cars into robots is one of the big promises of contemporary times. But what we see in the social technology of the roundabout of the traffic circle is a very different form of organization. So rather than a traditional red light intersection where you've got a controlled intersection, right? You've got a traffic engineer has designed an algorithm that says it's a red light, so you've delegated your responsibility to that traffic engineer, right? And if you go, then you get a ticket, right? You're non-compliant. Whereas at a traffic circle, what happens? A roundabout.
It's like all in the individual. Like
Right.
There's no one telling you when to go. It's just
Exactly.
a judgment.
It's you're making a judgment about when it's safe to go with your life, your vehicle, and actually you get higher throughput and fewer accidents when you use this form of headless social movement, self-organized systems, the paradigm of the participatory democracy, right? That people organize around their own interests, and if you design that well, you have a function. Otherwise, you have fascist control through technology or government or however you like it. But what we find over and again, and sometimes counterintuitively, is that self-organized systems where people are acting in their own interests for the collective good work best. And so if we wanted to really celebrate that as our issue, the proposal for the Roskill, the new thing is called the, if you want the smartest intersection is not. So it involves creating a synthetic cloud from electrostatic spray guns filled with water They're used in car body shops all the time, filled with water to create a cloud suspended over the intersection, ideally over the roundabout. The intersection is where we have the most concentrated air pollution, right? Because cars are stopping and starting and slowing down, and so a cloud with water droplets. The water droplets actually grab all the particulate pollution and by positioning it for the pedestrians at a 42-degree angle, we create a rainbow. So between 8 a.m. and 10 a.m. and between 4 p.m. and 6 p.m. we create a rainbow and a cloud. I do some extra charging on the droplets to be able to control the cloud a little more, but it'll precipitate out into the existing graded system where we can then direct the water to take those pollutants, it's just pulled out of the air, and diffuse it into the soil where you've got so much surface area you can grab all that stuff. And you throw 100,000 organisms per square centimetre at it and you create...
In the roundabout?
Well, this is designing the water runoff into bioswales or no parks so that you're creating a complex canopy structure to amplify, optimize, maximize the amount of leaf area indexing and complex canopy structure you have too.
I thought you meant like the roundabout itself, that space in the middle becomes its own space for, okay.
So everywhere where you then capture that water twice a day, you have a consistent supply. Therefore, you can create a very, if designed, a complex canopy structure that really has a diverse community of plants and really maximizes the amount of leaf area index and moves away from that kind of decorative tradition of plants as decoration. Nice decoration, planted evenly along the street. Right? That's not how they work best. Right? No plant is an island. And what we want is complex community structures. So this is again a kit that we can produce at the festival inexpensively, and people can take back and figure out where and how to do it. In front of schools, we're idling buses and other issues like
areas of major traffic jams too.
yes,
Like
exactly.
specific intersections where there's a lot of car buildup,
Yes.
especially in New York.
So you're doing exactly what the project is intended to do, right? It's not a huge infrastructure project like that took 2.5 years. I don't know what the budget was. 20% of the build budget goes to the design firm. It's in their interest to make it expensive, so that it is. Can anyone think of a place where they'd like to put a cloud or a rainbow? Okay, so similarly, there's the condition of the unshore line. So in Roskilde, there's a context. There's a couple of lakes. Lakes all over freshwater ecosystem. Who knows what's the problem with freshwater ecosystems across Europe? Across the entire Europe. What's happening to freshwater ecosystems? Lakes. Eutrophication. Heard of it? It's when nutrients go into, from farming and terrestrial activity, people, it runs off into the freshwater ecosystem, creates these algae blooms. The algae blooms die, decompose, they suckle, basically they that decomposition process means that there's the dissolved oxygen gets sucked out of the water. You produce a whole lot of CO2 from composting, right? Effectively composting then all the algae that's bloomed in the system. Huge problem. Ecosystems across Europe. Why?
Isn't it because like plants, like the roots can't absorb it, like around the freshwater ecosystems, there's like nothing to absorb it, and so it just goes in.
So the riparian zone is one big issue, yeah, and of course development in agriculture and roadborne pollution, or the runoff from roads and hard surfaces that we produce ends up nitrifying. So the big coupling driver of climate change is the nitrification of the aquatic ecosystem and the denitrification of the terrestrial ecosystem, right? Because what's a fertilizer in the terrestrial world is a pollutant in the aquatic world, right? So, okay, so we've got this problem. We understand this is one of the big issues. What do we do about it? What do we do? Why is it that we... a couple of simple things. This is a new material developed for Lord of the Rings. Anyone see Lord of the Rings? A New Zealand company called Cane Mail, after the guy Cane figured out how to produce these kind of a chain mail out of polycarbonate, which is the bulletproof plastic. Right? And it's now marketed as a screen for projections and for building cladding. It makes for a great security gate. It's transparent, right? So. But I've used it against his will to create moonwalks. Because what happened in Far Rockaway? This is just a mock-up, obviously. This boardwalk, big storm surge comes along, picks up the boardwalk, it rams into buildings and cars. It's deadly, right? A big rigid surface and water doesn't go well together. But what happens here, and in this project, we in the sandcastle competition, we built a small area of it, and people could run over it, walk over it. These little quotes of it. It's great for cycling, bikes and strollers. It's not very good for stiletto heels. It's not great for rollerblades either. I'm a rollerblader, but for joggers, for walking, it's fantastic, right? It's just same substructure, but it's a service. What else happens?
The water can go through, so it works.
There's no big rigid surface to act as a battering ram. And what else happens?
Also, I think it's more acidic.
Yeah, it is. It's more aesthetic not only for humans, but for... What happens underneath the boardwalk? Anybody crawled underneath the boardwalk?
Our plant can go through
The sun comes through, which in normal boardwalks are dark, right? Underneath, they're usually just a cigarette butts.
Yeah.
There's nothing growing under there. All that dune grass that actually stabilizes the beaches is not there. We're desertifying with this paradox where in order to create access to delicate ecosystems like dunes and wetlands, we create these big boardwalks that kill everything underneath. But here, we let 100% of the light through. And we foster and display all the biogeochemical processes and the skipper moths. And in this case, I was showing that it's a screen. So we don't actually have these point sources of light anymore. We can just diffuse it, actually. And so this concept that we can really transform the edge is critically important as weather conditions become more extreme. And what's happened in New York City? The reverse. This particular mayor wants it to be safe, so additional concrete, more mass. So this is the peer-to-peer system, which is something being proposed for the freshwater ecosystems the peer-to-peer system is a peer that uses similar 100% solar throughput, looks a little bit like this, to change the onshore line. In Cuba, this is actually part of a project I call the Cuban mussel crisis, which is the fact that mussels in Cuba, which has extraordinary macrological diversity, are worried, very worried. They have, we have extraordinary macrological diversity here in the verdant northeast. The two places, Cuba and the northeast of the US, have more, each of them has more mussel species than every other continent combined. Tremendous. But here we've had a complete extinction crisis. We've lost hundreds of species. In Cuba, the reefs, the aquatic ecosystem, are doing quite well. Why? What's different between Europe, the US, and Cuba?
Oh, sorry, I just think I'd say Europe to Cuba, then I was
Yeah, Europe to Cuba or US to Cuba. As US-Cuban relationships are changing,
There's less development there.
less development.
Less infrastructure.
What did they have, what happened to their oil when the Soviet Union collapsed? They've done agriculture without diesel, without petrochemical fertilizers. They've figured out how to survive without the extraordinary inputs that run off into the aquatic ecosystem. And mussels tell us everything that happens in aquatic ecosystems because they filter feed everything, right? They suck everything in. And the mussels are a very good indicator of what's going on terrestrially. The mussels in the port of Havana have been tested for 200 industrial contaminants. Their levels of the industrial contaminants in the mussels are lower than the contaminants, PCBs, and similar, in the breast milk of American women. Right? So they're practically pristine. But US-Cuban relationships are reforming. The first US company to set up shop there is a tractor company to do the kind of runoff, to promote the kind of runoff. But this is what piers look like in the waterfront looks like in Cuba, right? They're desperate for infrastructure input. They want, this is what piers look like in the northeast, right? As more extreme weather conditions are happening, what do? This is what we've been doing, right? Additional concrete, additional stuff to try and reinforce it. I'd argue that's radically wrong, and that we need to do a paradigm shift away from increasing the rigidity and mass towards something very different. So this is my pylon, my concrete pylon, which is just a buoy and 3 ropes, a tripod, right, in tension, that has helical anchors, so you can screw down until you know you don't have a big concrete block that you're dragging around, and a chain that's digging up all the eelgrass. You go down as far as you need to, and you can test it, and you have a submerged buoy and a static point, perfectly constrained static point. And so for maybe 100 to 1,000 times less expense, you get pylons that are 10 to 100 times stronger. Okay. And then when you combine them with a number of other strategies, including a pillow of ETFE, this material that's transparent. That material is covered with I'll show you an example of that in a minute. But that material is covered with a rope, so you get a mesh of rope, right? So you get pretty much 100% solar throughput, right? So all the algae and seaweed is growing underneath. It's not darkened and desertified. And then you attach mussel ropes, because mussels are the heavy lifters of water quality improvements. And if we're going to address this nitrification of the aquatic ecosystem, we have to call in the mussels. So we create mussel habitat. They're keystone organisms. So the mussels create these pliant megametropolises, unlike oysters. So they absorb storm energy. But in this case, we actually put them on ropes. Those ropes move. On the end of the ropes, we have bioscillators, so we generate clean energy with the constantly small amount of sufficient energy for a boat to come up and recharge. And unlike other wave energy generation, it uses all this anti-fouling stuff. Anti-fouling is poison, right? Used in the naval architecture and the all around the ports. Extraordinarily toxic stuff. In this case, as the mussels grow and they get heavier and they get more momentum, it's better. We generate more energy, right? So increasing the fouling, right? And of course all the water quality improvements that the mussels deliver to create. So this is actually a version of that pillow where you can fill it with grey water or marine water. It's a pillow that's inflated, breaking all the rules of engineering where we combine hydraulic systems and pneumatic systems. Put water in, and that water evaporates, condenses on the top, and runs down because it's a more than 20-degree angle, collects in the lip, and then we drip it out as a distilled or purified or desalinated water, right? Through, again, a slow, local water treatment facility to create. So we can build a pier that not only generates clean energy, not only increases the water quality, creates habitat for mussels and other organisms, but desalinates or distills water, is radically less expensive and many times stronger to, if you will, for our Cuban relationships. A pier is like an open handshake, right? To embody a different type of relationship. And it's these guys that really are the heroes of the story. The Mussel Choir is a project that I've been working on, and we're just about to open in Istanbul, which are taking the mussels and equipping them with sensors so we can measure their gape angle.
Measure what?
Their gape angle, how much they open and close. I take that gape angle and I turn it into music. Set them in a couple of different places, but in the Venice Lagoon we set the pitch and the depth of the mussels and had them singing. In this case, this is the touring rock band of the mussels. You can see here what we would have, what we're proposing to Roskilde is we take, can you see this is the opposite of a cloche that you would see in a museum of natural history. In the Museum of Natural Futures, these are cloches that display living as opposed to dead or stuffed animals. You can see the vacuum holds the water up, right, to put them on center stage. And the floating system counters the downward suction of the, to create a display of what's going on underwater. Because normally it's unseen, right? So we can have these various sizes where the muscles emerge and are on central stage and they perform. And so this is the one we did in the Venice Lagoon. The question you might ask is, what does a muscle choir sing? Very good question. And they do sing a version of this. Bicycle Belt for Two, do you know it? This was the first computer synthesized voice. So if you ask Siri to sing you a song, she or he or it will typically sing Bicycle Belt for Two. In HOWL 2001, computer sang this song in a trope. It's become the icon of artificial intelligence, right? Because it's it was the first synthesized voice. Computers can be intelligent, right? So AI, actually Aaron Coblin came along and did not a Bicycle Belt for Two, but a Bicycle Belt for 2000. And so that's actually riffing on this idea that this song represents artificial intelligence, because he got 2,000 Amazon Mechanical Turkers to sing ah, 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 and he put them all together to make Bicycle Belt for 2000. The Muscle Choir, their first hit single, is a Bicycle Built for Too Many, in which it iconifies not that kind of cynical distributed intelligence that Aaron Coblin did with the Mechanical Turkers, who don't know what they're singing, they don't know what they're contributing to, they're being paid not for their intelligence, but they're not being paid very much at all, right? So distributed intelligence is promising. I would opt for something I call natural intelligence, right? Where we take and we co-opt the muscles. These are the muscles in the Venice Lagoon singing Bicycle Belt for Too Many. That we take their muscles and their intelligent responses to the water quality, right? They're going to clam up, quite literally, if the water quality is too bad. They go into a flapping if they're if they're under stress. They'll open and close steadily in typical conditions, and so we can tell, I would argue, much more about that biologically meaningful representation than if we listen to, or if we look at all the EPA data, dissolved oxygen and turbidity and temperature and salinity, and what does that mean to you, to the muscle? You know, what does that mean? In this case, we are actually using the muscle behavior itself to represent water quality. So this idea that we can collaborate with non-humans to create a much more biologically meaningful, compelling, interpretable story about that. This is an installation similarly I just put in Tasmania. This idea that we can take what's under the water and we can spectacularize it. We can take that infrastructure and make it visible. Water quality monitoring we can turn into a muscle choir opera house as part of the pier-to-pier system, and a floating stage in the middle of Roskilde where we can bring those valuable organisms up. The freshwater mussels in Europe can live for around 250 years. They display very little senescence. And in fact, mussels have a long, long history of collaboration with humans. In fact, there's a big story about mussels that I think is tremendously fascinating, and it's probably the best example of mutualism that I can think of. The story of human evolution goes like this, typically, right? That we evolved on the plains, and we came down from the trees, and then at some point about 40,000 years ago, we developed tools and spears, and heroic men went and caught big animals and created a lot of caloric excess, and then we have specialization and culture, and we didn't have to scavenge for food all the time, right? That's this typical story of human evolution. Big problems with that story is that every other mammal on the plains, their brain to body ratio got smaller, right? Think of an antelope. Small brains, big bodies, right? Ours went the other way. Why is that?
Was there an evolutionary advantage?
Well, it's the weird thing about around humans, right? That we have this extraordinary protrusion we call the neocortex that is huge relative, not that much bigger, but it's bigger than other animals. And this is a membrane-rich organ. The only source of DHAs and EPAs, the kind of fish oils that people, how many people take a fish oil supplement here? I bet your parents do. People are popping them to live forever, but fish oil is a great source of, now every prenatal prescription has fish oil to promote brain growth, right? Because that brain demanded a steady source, an intergenerational source of EPAs and DHAs. And the only source of that on the plains was inside the brains of other animals. How easy do you think it is to get the brain of an antelope out of their skull? I don't really think that's what drove the neocortical expansion. But if you go around, has anybody seen a midden pile? Or does anybody know the midden theory of human evolution? I was just up in Maine. Have you seen midden piles? When I was a kid at school, because of the Australian Aborigines used a lot of, they were nomadic and they used a lot of textiles and a lot of decomposable culture. So there wasn't a lot to see except the midden piles. Midden piles are piles of shells, piles of mussels. And dotting around every continent, and I was just up in Maine a few weeks ago to see the midden piles there. 40 feet deep. I could see 40 feet of shell upon shell upon shell upon shell upon shell, right? Which suggests the idea that, in fact, for many, 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 many generations, we would migrate around the water's edge, and instead of heroic men hunting, running animals, it was probably women and children wading in the water to collect mussels to give us that steady supply of brain-growing EPAs and DHAs. Right? And so we probably owe our brain to mussels and the cohabitation with mussels and humans. And what's interesting is that the idea that we could now, the only viable form of aquaculture, according to the FAO and me, is cultivating mussels. And I would argue cultivating mussels in such a way that so if we all had, instead of community gardens, we all had little mussel cultivation around the water's edge, we would have a mega metropolis of storm surge absorbing, energy generating food system that doesn't deplete the fisheries, the other fisheries, and in fact improves water quality, whereas every other form of fisheries cultivation contaminates the water, right? So this idea that we can develop infrastructure that not only is delightful, not only is not invisible, not only addresses the challenges that we face, but that it can also aggregate, right, into this massive effect, seems to be critically important. Because otherwise it's going to be corporate engineering firms deciding how we live and scripting what we do. So I'd argue for this kind of headless social movement, this collective, wonder-driven, oh, that's cool, let's make it delightful, spectacular, and collectively produced, an open system that aggregates, and with openness comes improvements and a socio-ecological algorithm that might just address the big challenges we face. So that's the big ideas that I wanted to jump on with those ones. Let's take a quick break and we'll go from there.